So continuing from part 1, we are cold and dark at Schiphol Gate and about to do an electrical power up and then a pre-flight preliminary pre-flight procedure. So close the battery guard which switches it on, check that the standby guard is closed, that the alternative flap guard is closed, the left and right wipers are in the park position, the electrical hydraulic pumps verify that they're off. Check that the landing gear lever is down and there are 3 green lights confirming that. Make sure that the packs are off. Make sure that the APU is off. Then we'll use the CDU, FS Actions, and go to ground connections, where we will make sure that the ground power is connected, that the air conditioning is connected, and that the pitot covers have been removed. Check that the ground power available light is on and switch on the ground power. Check that the source transfer bus and the standby power lights go off. Switch on the position lights, which is a signal to ground crew that the aircraft has electrical power. Switch both RS mode selectors to nav and verify that the DC light goes on and then goes off again, and that the align light comes on. Switch on the voice recorder, check the crew oxygen pressure gauge. I believe anything above 11 psi is normal. On the lower DU, check that the oil percentage is normal and equal and there are no yellow refill buttons. Push the sys button and check the hydraulic fluid. Push the eng button to get back onto the engine readings. Check the fire extinguisher and the crash axe at the cockpit door. Check that the proximity switch light is out, that the service interphone switch is in the off position, that the reverser 1 and 2 lights are extinguished, that the 2 EEC switches are on. Check that the passenger oxygen guard is closed and don't touch it, because if the masts drop you won't be flying anywhere today. Verify that the backup landing lights are on, and all 3 of them, and that they're green. Check that the flight recorder switch guard is closed. Check the circuit breaker panel behind the first officer, not really modeled in the sim, but check it anyway. Open the CDU, check the aircraft model and thrust rating, and the nav data is up to date. Then go to the position initialization page. You'll see the GPS of the airport at the top. Let's go to the next page, check that the left and the right agree, pick one and put it in the scratch pad, and then go back to the previous page and insert it into where those little squares are. Enter the origin airport's ICAO code, the destination airport, and the flight number. We are then going to enter the route, and that can be done in any order. Usually in real life the route is put in first and the SID and star are put in later when they receive from air traffic control. Push the departure arrival button and tell the FMC which SID we're going to use, which is Rendy 1S, and which runway we're going to use, which is runway 24. Go to the second page of the route. We are going to use 8 airways today, so in the via column we can enter these airways, and a nice little shortcut, it will know the waypoints, excepting the last waypoint which we will need to enter. Hit the departure arrival button again and go to the Innsbruck arrivals. We will fly a star called Tulse 3A, which will bring us out at a waypoint called Rattenberg. From there we will fly the East Localizer DME arc to do a visual manual landing on runway 8 at Innsbruck. When this is completed, go into the legs page and step through the route, making sure there's continuity and no mistakes. Any corrections that need to be made can be made now. This is carefully done with the first officer, and once you are both happy, activate and execute the route. Hit the Init Ref button to go to the Performance Initialization page. Double click the 0 fuel weight line and PMG will calculate the 0 fuel weight for you. After doing a fuel calculation, the reserves were 3570 pounds. I will do a separate tutorial on fuel calculation because it's quite involved. We are flying with a cost index of 36 today. Enter our cruise altitude of 39,000 feet. Our cruise wind is 0, and that is written 360/0. EHAM's takeoff transition altitude is 3,000 feet. Let's execute that and move on to the N1 limit page. Here we're going to do a TO2 derated flight where our maximum thrust will be 22,000 pounds. We are also going to enter an assumed temperature of 45 degrees, which will derate the thrust even more. You will see when we do that, a climb to profile is automatically selected. Let's go to the takeoff page and set up a NADP2 noise abatement procedure. We need to go to page 2 of the takeoff page first. The default acceleration height is 1500 feet, but we are going to change this to 3000 feet. This means we will maintain climb thrust and pitch until that altitude before we let the nose drop and accelerate. We will leave the reduction height at its default of 1500 feet. This is where the engine thrust is reduced a few percent to save on wear and also as a noise abatement procedure. The engine out acceleration height of EHAM is 1000 feet, which means that if we lose an engine, it is safe to drop the nose and accelerate at 1000 feet. There will be no obstacles. We will also enter no wind and a runway slope of 0. Back to page 1 of the takeoff page, double click the center of gravity line and it will be calculated for you. Enter flaps 1 and the FMC will reward you with your trim setting. Make a note of the trim setting and click the keys next to V1, VR and V2 and note that they will appear on the speed tape of the PFD. Make a note of those as well. So far we have done the electrical power up, preliminary pre-flight procedures, and what is called the amplified normal procedure, which is the initial setup of the CDU. The first officer is back from his walk around, and we are now going to do the pre-flight setup. We are going to first do the first officer flows and then the captain's flows, but in reality they are done at the same time. Verify flight control A and B guards closed. Verify spoiler A and B closed. Turn yaw damper on. Verify light extinguished. Verify standby hydraulic low quality, low pressure lights both extinguished. Verify standby rudder light extinguished. Verify red alternate flap switch guard closed and white position switch neck to earth is off. Verify field diff press, speed trim fail, auto slat fail, all extinguished. Move to the navigation displays and verify VHF nav, IRS transfer and FMC transfer switches are all in the normal position. Verify source selector is in auto and control panel switch is normal. Moving to the fuel panel, verify engine valve closed and spar valve closed are illuminated. Verify filter bypass lights are extinguished. Verify cross feed valve closed and valve open lights are extinguished. Verify all 6 fuel pump switches are off. Verify center low pressure light extinguished and main tank low pressure light illuminated. On the electrical panel, verify that the battery switch guard is closed. Cab util and IFPAS seat switches to the left of the battery are on. Verify the following lights are extinguished. Standby power off, battery discharge, TR unit and elect. Verify the red generator drive connect switches are closed and drive lights illuminated. Verify bus trans switch has the guard closed and is therefore on auto. A fire test is done on the first flight of the day. Verify that the overheat dead switches are on auto, that the red fire switches are in and that there are no lights on. Move the switch to fault and the fault and APU det inop lights needs to come on. And look up at the captain's main panel and the first office and check that the fire warning light has come on. Now push the button to the overheat fire position and leave it there. Verify that there's an oral fire warning bell. The pedestal red lights for the APU and 2 engines come on. The wheel well light illuminates. The red fire warning amber master caution light on the captain and the first officer side come on. Push the captain's fire warning and verify that the fire warning on both sides extinguishes, that the oral bell stops, and verify that the APU engine 1 overheat and engine 2 overheat and wheel well lights all stay illuminated. Now test the APU and engine fire extinguisher system. Move the test button first to position 1 and then to position 2 and verify that the 3 green lights come on. Let's do an APU start. Turn the left forward fuel pump on. Switch the APU switch on and verify that the blue APU gen off bus light on the electrical panel comes on. Click both APU generator switches. Transfer power from ground to APU. Verify that both equipment cooling switches are in the normal position. Close the emergency light guards which arms them. Fasten seat belts. No smoking is now a signal chime for crew. Go to the window heat and cooling buttons on the top of the panel and make sure that they all switched on. Verify that the wing anti-ice switch is off and the left and right valve open lights are extinguished. Verify that engine 1 and engine 2 hydraulic pump switches are on and elect 1 and elect 2 are off. Move to the air temperature panel. Set air temp source selector as needed. Verify trim air switch is on. Verify zone temp lights extinguished, and all of them being on auto is fine for our purposes. The next thing we're going to do is disconnect ground power and air conditioning. Go into FS Actions, ground connections, and disconnect ground power and air conditioning. Let's move over to the main pneumatic panel. The left and right circulation fans are put onto auto. Set the left and right pack switches to auto. We can use the packs again because the ground source has been removed. Verify isolation valve open. Verify engine 1 APU, engine 2 are all on, and that the dual bleed light above the left recirc switch is illuminated. Verify pack off, wing body overheat and bleed trip off lights are all extinguished. Moving to the pressurization panel, verify that the autofail and off schedule descent lights are extinguished. We're going to put our flight cruise altitude of 39,000 feet and our runway altitude of 1,950 feet. Moving to the lighting strip, verify that the retractable and fixed landing lights are off. Verify runway turn off and taxi lights are off. Move the ignition switch to R. We're going to start the right engine first. Verify logo light off. Verify position light is in the steady position. Verify that the anti-collision light is off. Verify that the wing light and the wheel well lights are also off. Moving to the central panel, put the auto brake into rejected takeoff. Check that the auto brake light goes on and then off. Verify N1 set and speed ref knobs are both in auto. Put the fuel flow button to reset. Scan both engine DUs for any exceedances. Press the CR cancel recall and verify no auto land status advisory message is shown. The next thing we need to do is test the cargo fire system. Push the cargo test button and listen for an oral warning. Look at the master fire warning light illuminated on the captain's glare shield. Push that light and verify that the fire warning lights extinguish. The oral warning stops, but the forward aft detector fault extinguisher and discharge lights stay illuminated. Radios, we will leave the Victor radios alone because we are not using ATC. The nav radios, we will set these to frequencies that will help us return to Schiphol. Nav 1 will have Schiphol VOR active and the ILS frequency for runway 27. Nav 2 will have the PAM VOR active and the ILS for return to 18C. Runway 24 is only used for takeoff. We will set the ADF radio to Schiphol's NDB. The transponder is set to 2200 and we'll do a TCAS test as well.
TCAS test pass.
And while we're down here, we will check that the stab trim overrides have their guards in place. The last thing we're going to do in this video is the captain's pre-flight flows, which hopefully are less tedious than the first officers and a bit more interesting. Start by pushing the light test button and looking around the cockpit to see that every light bulb in the cockpit is working. Set the minimums on the EFIS panel to baro, and we're going to set a figure of 989, which is 1,000 feet minus our runway altitude, which is minus 11 feet. This is our engine out acceleration height. Set the baro to HPA and set it to 1013 because we will be flying without weather today. Set the left VOR on VOR 1 and the right side on VOR 2. Set the ND in map mode and set it to a range of 10 nautical miles and press the TFC button to have TCAS traffic displayed. Set the captain's course to 106 and the first officer to 225, which are VORs that we may have to use to return to the airport. Put the captain's flight director on first, followed by the first officer's flight director. Verify that the bank angle is set at 25. Verify that the autopilot disengage bar is up. Check the crew oxygen to the left side of the captain. Push the flap and you'll hear the oxygen coming out and see a yellow cross. Push the emergency test selector button in and repeat the process. Verify that the chronometer matches the FMC. Verify that the nose well guard below the clock is down. Verify that the main display unit switches are on normal. Check that the APAT FMC test has 2 red lights and an amber. Check that the TCAS flag on the ND is off. Check that all the modes in the PFD are blank. Check that there are no CDI showing. Check that the ISFD altimeter is in HPA and set to 1013. Check that there are no flags or error messages. Set both selectors on the analog standby RMI to ADF. Check that the speed brake lever is down and the speed brake armed lights are all off. Verify that the reverse thrusts are down and stowed. Check that the flap lever matches the dial reading. Set the parking brake so that we can remove the chocks in FS actions. Check that the engine start levers are in cutoff and that the stab trim cutouts are in the normal position. Set up the HUD for a possible return to runway 27. The runway is 11,329 feet long. And the altitude is minus 11 feet and the glide slope is minus 3. The pilots will then do the pre-flight checklist. In this video we did electrical power up, preliminary pre-flight procedures, which included setting up the CDU for route and performance, and then we did the cockpit flows of the first officer and the captain. We'll probably do separate videos for startup, pushback, taxi and before start, then takeoff to top of descent, and then finally top of descent to landing. Thanks for watching and goodbye.